Now joining me in studio to discuss this further, political analyst Professor Siposiyepe is here in studio. And of course, to you, our viewers, welcome to ANN7 Prime. You're welcome to join in the conversation on our Twitter handle at ANN7TV. Professor, very good evening to you and welcome.
Good evening.
I'm sure you're following the proceedings there from the General Secretary, Gwede Mantashe, saying that all is on course for them with the branch meetings. And of course, the issue of the KwaZulu-Natal, I suppose that is one of the top issues that they would have been discussing today. He speaks of a task team that will be sent to the province to make sure that the elective conference will go ahead seamlessly, so to speak.
Well, there are two things that I seem to have heard him say. One is the argument that is presented by some people within the ANC that the court did not deal with the merits. It dealt with what they call technical issues in terms of when was the conference supposed to be held, and whether the conference curated had all the members, even those who took the ANC to court, whether they were participants, and whether you could say that anybody who was supposed to be there was there. So that is one issue, that one argument.
So that's the clarification that the SG was speaking about that they required.
Yeah, okay. Because I think it's also an important thing, not only for the ANC, but also broadly, whether courts, in terms of dispensing justice, whether justice can be compromised on the basis of a technicality. Because if it becomes a matter of technicality, you're going to end up with a problem where some people may not even be able. Sometimes you have processes in government, especially in criminal justice system, that says you should have filed on this day, you should have done this, and you find that some of our people, because they do not know those, they can end up being compromised, and the justice not being served. So it's very important to check whether technical issues can or should be allowed to suspend or undermine justice. So that is why the issue of exploring the possibility of appealing to the Supreme Court of Appeal makes sense. But as I say, it's not only good for, that clarity is not only good for the ANC, it's also good for general society.
So it was essentially a lesson learned that will help the conferences, elective conferences going forward to see what needs to be done and what doesn't need to be done. I mean, KwaZulu-Natal being a very pivotal, province when it comes to politics within the ANC, I think it was important that this happened. I also want to acknowledge, just joined us in studio, Mr. Botsang Moila. Very good evening to you. Thank you for joining us. Yes, you're on your phone, but you're welcome to join in the conversation. Also, we have Oliver Dixon, who will be joining us, socio-political analyst. Oliver, I do hope that you can hear me. Your reactions with the pointers we got from the SG, the ANC NEC meeting that happened in Pretoria, Irene, today.
I think quite importantly, Gwede Mantashe just gave a lot of clarity on issues that we thought were going to lead to things like the conference not happening, because there was a lot of talk about that. I think he gave clarity on that. Importantly, however, he also gave clarity on what the ANC standing is on the court ruling, which was important because a lot of members within the ANC said, no, the court case shouldn't have happened, we should deal with it internally. And Gwede welcomed the ruling, but what he also made very clear is that in the future, the first resolution should be that the ANC should be able to solve their own problems politically internally. I think that's a call to himself, however, because the only reason that thing went to court was because Gwede Mantashe refused to step in, at least not blatantly refused, but his silence on the matter for a long time came across as refusal to engage with the messiness that was going on in KZN. Him now saying that we need to deal with the issues internally politically means that he acknowledges that he needs to act much faster in the future.
It's a very important topic there being raised by Oliver, saying perhaps this was a message to himself as the SG, that this actually got to this point because of the leadership of the ANC, and of course Gwede Mantashe being one of those. Yeah,
I think it is the three lessons to be learned, and I think we must also welcome sometimes mistakes that people make, because sometimes the lessons come through mistakes that people make. So the first one is the ANC needing to be rigorous in its processes to make sure that it doesn't undermine what people call the cause of social justice. The second thing is the willingness to find a political solution, because ultimately, once the court make decisions, you still have to go back to find a political solution. So that's one big lesson that the ANC must learn. But the other important issue is that in a consumer democracy, this is also an affirmation that there is a platform where people feel that if their concerns are not addressed, they will need a neutral arbiter. But it does not mean that the neutral arbiters are always correct.
Right.
Because sometimes they may not have an appreciation of the broader political repercussions and the consequences of the decision that they make. And what you now see is also the lesson that might emerge is for them, if they appeal this, we might get clarity around the issue of merit versus technical issues. Because if the court always rely on technical issues, and let me also say, sometimes you find courts that will say, well, we hear this, but we would like to hear the merits.
Right.
And on the basis of the merits, then make a decision. And I know of one case where a person where there was an appointment, and the question was whether the body that made an appointment was competent to make that decision. And the court ruled in favor of that body, even though the merits suggest otherwise. And there have been instances where a similar case, where a court says, I can hear that part, but let's look at the merits, and they find that the merits are not sustainable, and then they make a ruling. So the courts are never clear. So at this early stage, it's very good that sometimes we may have to pursue the idea of the courts just for the sake of providing clarity in terms of our jurisprudence.
Yeah.
But most importantly is the point that Gwede was saying, that political issues must ultimately be solved politically.
Yeah, and also saying ultimately this should represent a unifying moment for the organization coming out of this debacle with KwaZulu-Natal. Also, another key question that has been raised, perhaps, Oliver, you could give us your take on this, whether Senzo Mqunu and Sihle Zikalala factions could possibly share power for the sake of the ANC. Is that overreaching?
I think it is a bit overreaching, given just the density and of the tension within KZN. But I think importantly here, what we do hear from Gwede Mantashe, and I think what the ANC's action will be to actually step in and allow these two factions to work together, because the organization cannot be ruled by factions. And I think that's quite important, because there's a lot of factionalism talk going into the NEC, going into the national conference at Nasrec in December. I think importantly, this court case helps us to solve those things, because the court case clears out the technical issues for us, which could ultimately have impacted the political issues. You see, when technical issues impact political issues, credibility is evaded.
Another question that has been, of course, we know the ANC General Secretary. I'll come to you, introducing Mr. Edward Mitole, political analyst. There was, the SG a few days ago having said that we'll postpone the provincial elective conferences until after, what's happening in December with the ANC. Do you think perhaps this should be settled, this matter of provincial election, before they get to the December elective conference?
Exactly. The ANC, we cannot expect the ANC to move into the elective conference with divided factions, because factionalism is the antithesis of the ANC. As we stand now, we see an ANC that is not driven from the NEC. It's driven by factions, and these factions are based in provinces. So the earlier we can have an ANC that has got well-oiled unity, because unity will be crucial as we move to December. There is no way ANC can claim to be healthy when we have factionalism. So I think the provincial elections should be settled. There must be some deliberate efforts from the NEC to ensure that the provincial committees go back to the drawing board and look at the root causes of all these problems that are cropping up now in 3 months before from the December conference.
Yeah, Botsang, your views on this as the roadmap to the elective conference. Should the provincial elections be sorted out first? How important is that?
Well, good evening, Audrey, fellow panelists and the viewers. It is very crucial. Looking at the time frame, it's going to be a little bit difficult, especially when there's resistance from provinces. We know that last week, before the NEC announced the task team, the provincial PEC had said it is within their right to can challenge a court ruling and so forth. We should just sit down and hope and pray that they don't go through that route and they will respect the decision of the NEC to try and resolve the challenges in the province. But also it is very crucial, responding to your question, it's very crucial that the PECs are well established, they are intact as well as the branches, because we should recall that going to the elective conference, it is the branches that send delegates through provincial structures that will elect the new leadership as well as, and we should not only focus on election of a new leadership of the ruling party, we should also focus on policies that will be adopted at that conference. Now, if you are going to go with a torn-apart organization that is not well, glued up, and you will have difficulties in adopting very critical policies that may end up being national policies after the general elections come 2019. So it is very crucial that the ANC must go to its most difficult elective conference. A lot of people has compared it to the Mogogoro conference, but I think, in my view, it is the most difficult conference the ANC has ever been faced with, where there's more factions, more challenges. The organization has evolved, has grown over 100 years, and they will need to go there united, talking in one voice. There has been efforts. We saw spearheaded by the provincial premier of Mpumalanga and inviting others. The NEC has put a task team. Let's hope that the task team that has been put at hand, it will not be drawn into factional lines at KwaZulu-Natal. It will not be drawn into who's favoring who. It will look at the organization holistically and to come up with candidates. We all know that KwaZulu-Natal has the biggest delegation that is supposed to go to the elective conference. So you don't want to compromise.
And you don't want to go forward with having such a crucial region. And you don't also want to go forward
without them.
Being united.
Yes.
Professor Siepe, do you think perhaps the SG would have looked at this differently with regards to his postponement of the elective conference within the provinces?
Well, I mean, first of all, I mean, Botsang was one of the people who was brave to suggest that maybe we might not even have the national conference. But
that is a bold thing to say.
I'm not into the Sangoma business, but he has a far-seeing eye. But the long and short of it is that it's important for the ANC to resolve this issue in KwaZulu-Natal. But at the same time, we must also understand that as the chair or the current chair had indicated, that when it comes to the conference, it is the branches that they are willing to consider a situation where there is less emphasis on the PEC, but there's more emphasis on making sure that the branches are able to select the people who will be delegates. So there are two elements. But to have a province that is united, that has a position, is always good for the ANC. And I think they need to, these are not impossible things. I mean, we had national elections when people thought we will not have them in 1994. This is simply about one party. So if we could do that with, given the history, and in a short time find a solution, the ANC must pull on those capabilities that we were able to show, and also the sense of goodwill. And sometimes goodwill comes because of the crisis, where people begin to realize that we actually need each other. They might actually have thought that they could run away from this level of internal contestation. Actually, they should start calling each other comrades, and they should actually start meaning it. Because at the moment, there is more emphasis on being opposed to others, and not understanding the comrade used to mean that I trust this person, that I can even trust him with my life, or with, so they need to reclaim that.
Yeah, element. Really, a lot of questions that, we're hoping from this press up would come out, expectations of both teams, the Senzo Mchunu camp, of course, being able to accept this interim task team that the SG spoke about. Yes, sir, do you think this would be working as we go forward, Mr. Mitole?
At the heart of ANC is forces playing to try to divide the ANC.
So you're saying the center itself is not holding. This is where the rot is coming from.
The center cannot hold anymore because, as we can see, there are so many forces trying to divide the ANC, trying to destroy the ANC from within. And these forces, you know, come from white monopoly capital. We have seen already what white monopoly capital is doing, you know, trying to buy MPs, trying to buy even councillors to try to disrupt the functioning of the ANC. And this is now getting even more vicious as we approach December conference. The ANC task team is a good initiative. We might debate about what the terms of reference will be or what this task team intends to achieve. But at the end of the day, the task team has to begin work immediately in terms of investigating what is happening really in KZN.
Yeah, and really the fear of violence. We've seen the political killings happening in KwaZulu-Natal, particularly with this issue. If it is not handled as carefully as it should be, there really could be tensions breaking out.
I agree, Audrey. You know what we should as a nation be concerned about is the killing of each other for political position or political ideologies as well as political differences. We don't have to go and destroy each other. This is even worse because in this instance, it's the children of the African National Congress. You know, they don't have ideological differences. They don't have political differences. It's personalities or who is supposed to be in power or not. If I was in the NEC of the ANC and I would give them an advice, I've worked with a lot of conflict resolution, domestically as well as outside the country. One of the key elements in conflict resolutions is to make the parties to put their position on the table, make them own a process and be responsible. Don't impose this team that has been identified on them because one side may rebel or revolt against this team.
Right.
If they had the way, the NEC of the ANC should have called these two so-called factions. We should not deny that there's two groups, one that took the other to court, and you put them in one room.
Do you think they should have been part of the meeting that happened today with the NEC?
Not necessarily the meeting that happened today, but there should have been direct consultation with the two parties together under one roof and put them as comrades, as sons of Tambo and Mandela in one room and say, what is your issue and what is your issue? And ask them also, don't only look at the problems at the moment. There's no time to look at the problems because we know what the problem was. The courts have ruled into this. They should look at possible solutions, but you should make the parties in a conflict to bring proposals and solutions. They must bring possible proposals on the table. Then that's when the NEC comes in with the elected task team and say, task team, these are the weights and key points from both factions. Can you look into only what they've put on the table? Instead of coming with suggestions to the two factions, you take points from the two factions, you put them on the table, then the task team reduce those elements and points to can try and satisfy both parties. If they have done it that way, and they still have a chance, they can call them in.
It can't be too late. Yeah,
it can't be too late, yes.
I want to go to our reporter who's coming to us live from Irene. ANC reporter Natasha Piri has been following the story the whole day with the ANC NEC meeting, and of course the presser that we just got from the SG a few minutes ago. Natasha, good evening. Thank you for joining us. The main points coming from the press briefing besides what we're already discussing, of course, in studio.
Well, very good evening to you, Audrey and Here's quite a long wait for us, the media, just anticipating and waiting for, their predictions, their deliberations, their discussions out of the special NEC meeting. And, the hot and pertinent issue that we got out of here is that it's quite safe to say that the PEC and KZN has not formally been disbanded. But what we heard from the NEC is that it accepts the judgment of the Pietermaritzburg court to nullify the 2015 KZN elective conference. But we also got out of there, it was quite interesting, is that they said they need to consult more. So they will consult with the senior council over the next 3 days, and possibly next week when they have their NEC, meetings throughout the week, Audrey, we will know whether, the PC will be disbanded or not. And also you raised quite pertinent, important issues when speaking to your guests about political killings. When we asked the SG, Gwede Mantashe, about political killings, he says we shouldn't actually brand it as political killings, as it would be nice to actually brand it as that. But these are actually acts of criminality. And as we've heard the police minister throughout this week saying that they have arrested some suspects. Unfortunately, one suspect had died in connection with, the shooting of the councillor Sindiso Makata, who was a former ANC Youth League member. So these are the hot and pertinent issues that actually came out, saying that the NEC does accept the Pietermaritzburg court's decision, but they will further deliberate and will further tell the media, what the outcomes will be, whether they will disband the KZN PEC or not. And this will only happen next week, Audrey, at their formal NEC. As, just to remind you and the viewers that this was only a special NEC that was held to actually deal with those topics. They didn't, the SG actually had indicated that they didn't discuss other issues outside of that, such as Umakhosi Khoza actually resigning or rather quitting the ANC. Not much was actually said about that. In fact, nothing at all was actually said around those issues as well. Nothing said about, ANC NEC member Mitole saying that the NEC was actually at fault, for the current situation here in KZN. But it would quite be interesting to actually see what actually happens next week. So I think all eyes will be on the NEC meeting next week as to whether to know whether the KZN PEC will be disbanded or not. But from us here at St. George's, Audrey, that's all we have from you. Back to you in studio.
Absolutely, Natasha. Thank you for giving us that update. Our reporter, Natasha Perry, coming to us outside of Irene, where we just had the ANC NEC meet, and the press are there from the Secretary General, just giving us the main points. And of course, the issue of Makhosi Khoza came up there. That's the former ANC Member of Parliament who quit the party yesterday. She has hinted at the possibility of joining civil rights and anti-corruption organizations. Speaking to the media, she implied that ANC leaders of all levels of the government could swap their shiny suits for prison overalls. Some of Khoza's backers in the ANC say that her resignation is understandable as her safety was at risk. There is speculation, however, that she may form or join a political party, a new one rather. Khoza, however, does seem to have the backing of some key ANC leaders. These include NEC members Lindiwe Sisulu, Bekicele, as well as the former Mpumalanga Premier, that's Matthews Poza.
Now, when one Makhosi Khoza leaves, the leader of Comrade Mapatsu, who leads MKVA, he says good riddance. Now, Comrade Mapatsu forgets that he has only one vote. He has one vote. So when you say to somebody good riddance, but you have one vote, what do you mean? Magahambe. Magahambe. So mabahambe nje abantu. Bahambe nje. We will form the quorum.
I want to welcome the decision taken by Dr. Makhosi Khoza to resign her membership from the ANC. It's South Africans like her who demonstrate the fact that at first we must be liberated and then we must liberate ourselves from the liberators. She stands, as tough a decision as it is, she shows bravery and integrity.
Professor Siposipa, I want to come back to you. We mentioned some people that are backing Makhosi Khoza, the former Member of Parliament of the ANC, with her move. We spoke of Lindiwe Sisulu, Bekicele, Matthews Poza. Does that say anything to you?
Well, I think we should not read too much into the notion of backing, because if you back somebody, then you are going to behave like that person. Then you'll also be saying, I will leave the organization.
That's what I'm driving to. Should we see anything into that?
Backing suggesting that they are actually saying we are going to follow. What they are actually saying is that they support her outspokenness. And the question that one must raise that you expect that that will also be a course of action that they are going to take. to, if you say you admire somebody, then you emulate that person. So that's the first thing. But the second thing is the posture of Makosi has always been about her being holier than the rest. And I'm not too sure that those who remain in the ANC are as corrupt as she suggests. Then all of them are corrupt. So there needs to be a clarity on that. But there's also other elements that where a person begins to define themselves outside the organization. And in as much as one may agree with some of the issues that she has raised, I don't think there's any organization that will support that. And the reason why she gets this airtime, it's a very simple one. The media and those who are opposed to the ANC always cherish and support those people who create tensions within the ANC, because that leads to the weakening of the ANC. So it doesn't come as a surprise that you'll have that level of support. I mean, she has been the darling of the media in the same way that people like her in the past who were within the ANC were given the same until they left the ANC. Then once you leave the ANC, you are of no use. We saw that happen with Olomesa, who was also a darling and who was very seriously senior in the ANC. He was called the People's General. But once he left, his importance fizzled. We saw that with Musiwa Lukota. When COPE was started, because even before it was started, because it was a rupture within the ANC, there was an excitement in the media. And the COPE is now almost dying. Then we will see with her as well. Yeah. But what is important is the people have argued that within the ANC there are enough structures to be able to deal with it. But when you define yourself outside, so her resignation should not come as a surprise. And you must contrast that with Julius Malema. Julius he went through the process of DC, and he actually said he wants to remain in the ANC. It was the ANC that pushed her out. And I think Makosi Zokoza might actually have seen that if Julius, who wanted to remain in the ANC and who was willing to submit himself to the discipline of the ANC, ends up being expelled, her case would have been worse, because she is seen as part of the joining the forces that are very opposed to the ANC, and they have been historically opposed to the ANC.
Yeah. And she's made it very clear that she will not be joining the Democratic Alliance. One would ask, is there space for Makosi Koza between the ANC and the DA and other political parties? I just want us to go back to Oliver Dixon, socio-political analyst. Thank you for your patience, Oliver. Makosi Koza has always said she fears for her life. You know, the lives of her children even are in danger. Now that she's out of the ANC, do you think she has more reason to worry about this?
Perhaps not. I actually don't quite understand the dynamics of the threats that have been coming to her. The extent of what we know about the threats that she's been receiving on her life and that of her family is only what she's been telling us. We know nothing more than that. Importantly, however, I'm disappointed in how the ANC handled those threats. They didn't give her the necessary sympathy and protection when she needed it the most. And I think that may have been one of the forces to drive her out. We shouldn't take her resignation from the ANC or her divorce from the ANC lightly, because it can draw a certain impact, as we've seen people like Matthews Pause already supporting her principles, her stances, and her actions. And we think there may well be many other members in the ANC, influential members, who support her stance on these sort of things. And have these things impacted the ANC's electorate? Yes, it has. Bantu Olomisa, Musiwa Lukota, Julius Malema. Those are all people who left the ANC with large parts of its electorate. Today, the ANC only holds 58% of the South African electorate instead of the 68% it used to hold, and that's worrying. If members feel that they have no alternative resolution within the ANC and opt to leave the party, and we think we need to be able to stop that from happening. We need to allow for people and for their issues to be resolved internally. Importantly, then, do I think Makosi Koza should have left the ANC? I don't think she should have. I think she should have fought much harder internally to get the sort of issues that she wants to put on the table to be put on the table. The National Elective Conference would have been a good time for that to happen. And I think Gwede Mantashe makes a very important declaratory statement there when he says the National Conference is a conference of branches, not of provinces. And branches, much smaller than provinces, have very diverse views. and they vote based on those diverse views that they have. I think importantly then, Makosi Khoza should have went back to her branch and participated at that level, where she can allow her voice to exist within the branch, where her fellow branch members will challenge her on her views, her stances and actions.
And I suppose the question now is what next for Makosi Khoza? Where does she fit into the greater plan of things? You know, some would say she's a savvy politician, some would say she's not. Of course, she says she'll be joining civic organizations, not joining any political party, perhaps forming a new party. Where do you think this is going when all the media frenzy has died down?
Well, you see, the media frenzy, we should keep in mind that it's a white capital media that created this frenzy, and she played to the gallery of this media, and that's the sad part, that she played into the gallery, not within the organization. Prof elaborated very well on how institutional processes work within the African National Congress, and stubborn people, you know, hardcore African National Congress members like Bantolo Misa, the former general, as he was saying, Julius Malema, they went through those processes. But despite disciplinary hearing, let's leave the disciplinary hearing aside and focus on her conduct before disciplinary hearing was instituted. She was talking to the media, not to the leadership of the ANC. She was talking to the media, not to the branch, as Oliver Dixon is mentioning. She had an opportunity to go back to the branch that deployed her to Parliament and say, things are not going away the way it's supposed to, where you have sent me to do this work. They're not happening that way. I'm therefore coming back to the branch and lamenting to say, what can we do? She didn't use that option. She's an old senior person in the ANC. She should have known the processes. She elected to work outside the organization, and therefore no organization in the world, whether it's an employer, whether it's the political party, any organization will never allow
the structures to go to. Unfortunately, we'll have to leave it there. We've completely ran out of time. Botang, thank you for your contribution. Of course, Professor Siposiepe as well joining me in studio. Mr. Edward Mitole, also a political analyst. Thank you so much for your time. Socio-political analyst Oliver Dixon joining us live as well from his location. Thank you all for your contribution. You're at home for watching ANN7 Prime. It's time for a very short break, but do stay with us. We'll be back in a moment.